So welcome back to Walk with TFB, day three, in the final session of day three of the 2024 Internationalization Athletic Summit. There aren't, well, similar to parents, right? We don't have favorite children. I'm not the same. I do have favorite people, but also favorite sessions. This is definitely one of my favorite sessions throughout this week. I'm just giving one the topic, two their expertise, but also previous conversations that I know will guide what this individual has to share with us on this Wednesday, May the 8th. I'm very excited for this session for, like I said, a number of different reasons, primarily because we're talking about sport in Saudi Arabia. Sport in Saudi Arabia, which for many people, they have their both implicit and explicit biases, many of which are not, or most of which are rooted in not the truth. I'm not gonna say lies, but not the truth. So this session is gonna help shed truth, shed light, give context to not just what has happened, where we are, but also forecast what's to come. Per usual, for those who are on the call, use the chat function to ask any and all of your questions. I want to make sure this is a community conversation. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce my friend Tatyana to share more about who you are, a little bit about your story. I say a little bit, obviously relative, however long you want to take. You got 55 minutes yourself, but who you are, what's your story, and why this topic? I know when I reached out to you, I was like, is she gonna say yes? She gonna say, hopefully say yes.
So hi everybody. My name is Tatyana. Oh, there's a lot of reasons why I do what I do, but I think for me personally, it's been my personal kind of love project, just trying to get to myself culturally. And of course, I went to school for sport. Was not better than creating a space where sport and culture can combine, especially in a culture that is as uh convoluted, I guess is a good word to say right now, as culture in the Middle East. Is part of my identity. So, I'd love to have these conversations. I love to see like the little light bulbs go off in people's minds when we have these conversations about a lot of the times people focus on sport washing when it comes to Saudi
Hmm.
Arabia, but
Hmm.
hopefully by the time I'm through, you'll realize that sport washing may not be what you think it is, in terms of this introduction to Saudi Arabia in Western sport. What am I doing right now? We're in between gigs, we're interviewing, we're having a great time. I traveled a lot, got to meet a lot of really cool people. I just got back from Saudi Arabia in the end of February. So all of the stuff that like I'm talking about has been stuff that I've seen, things that I've experienced. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
I thought you were gonna mention this. I'll mention it for you. But myself and Tatiana and I met in class March 2023. If I'm mistaken. I was in Greenville. Yep, March 23. And so, well, again, to provide context before they go through the presentation, in class, Tatiana's like probably the only person asking questions in that class, which is whatever. Obviously led to this, but afterwards we connected right before the summit, and I was like yada yada yada. And that's when you told me you're Saudi Arabian. I'm like, huh? To an international athlete. That's what it was. To international athletes. I was
Yep.
like, what?
Hmm.
And so even my own bias, and I've said this on the record in our last podcast interview, my own bias was challenging that way. So again, excited to continue for you to challenge what I do know, don't know, but also share with the world again more about you, your culture, your country. So without further ado, I'll let you take over the screen, my friend, and take us to class. Show us some, show us some things. Let's see, make sure. Oops. All right, there you go.
Okay. Where is it? Oh, there's the in green. Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go ahead and. Okay, so today we are talking about sport in Saudi Arabia. I like to call this section, whenever I talk to people, beyond borders, because a lot of the times when we talk about sport, we don't really think about it in the context of the way that it really does go beyond borders of just a sport. It ties into culture, it ties into a lot of the things that make the world global, and international, and that interconnectedness of just meeting. um So, yeah, today I am just gonna go through these five little topics. Again, like Tim said, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in. This setup is kind of in my mind strategically how it makes sense to set everything up. Just trying to explain more about what is going on in Saudi Arabia and where I personally see it going. So I will go ahead and get us started. So the first thing with any country that needs to be done is always kind of restructuring this perception. And when it comes to countries in the Middle East, we know with the Western view kind of put in the center of it, it was time for us to take the time to really go ahead and unpack a lot of the biases that we have um, and create that open space. So, of course, with anything, you have to pique people's interest. And the American standpoint, I remember the biggest thing about Saudi Arabia that was breaking news was the Live Golf um, situation. However, for those people who may not know, the first real big move for Saudi Arabia in Western sport was their bid for the F1 circuit, which I think happened around 2016. And then the um, Jeddah race came into effect in 2021. So it was the first Middle Eastern race to be added during COVID, which was really uh it was an interesting point in time. But when I say make a big entrance, I'm talking about, of course, these kind of shocker events that kind of shake the table. And then, of course, once you peak interest, you kind of move into establishing things. And I have global assimilation and breaking misconceptions. One thing that I don't think a lot of people know is that when countries globally assimilate, a lot of the times they have to take on a more Eurocentric or American centric standpoint. Whereas um, you see now, if you go to the airport in Jeddah or Riyadh, um, there's a lot of English now. There was once a time where there was very, very minimal English. Everything was kind of like Arabic all on the walls. Now we're starting to see the effects of this global assimilation of, hey, we're trying to fit in and we want people to be here and be comfortable. So we have to make this universal language very forefront for not only tourism, but just overall business. And then the breaking misconceptions, that's something I'll go through throughout this entire presentation where, we have misconceptions about women working, about how things run. Again, Saudi Arabia is a kingdom. So I think that part also kind of trips people up because when you think of the kingdom, of course, you kind of automatically think about the UK, but there's other places that are kingdoms. Um, Quite a few Middle Eastern countries are. So yeah. And then from there, I want to really talk about like global migration. And when I talk about global migration, we have to be really cognizant of the fact that right now we live in a time where global migration is very tech centered. I mentioned this and I talk about it a lot, how your TikTok algorithms, your Instagram reels, your Facebook, your Snapchat really allow you to travel to a place without ever leaving the comfort of your home. Snapchat, you can literally go on a map, put in whatever country you want to see, and you will see snaps of that have that geotag. Um, TikTok was really big during the World Cup in Qatar, where we saw a lot of Arabic culture kind of be front and center on social media for about a month. And from there, we had people make songs out of jokes, and we saw people have first, second, and third hand experiences with Arabic culture, where we saw people wearing thobes and talking and doing interviews and all of these things where essentially you would have to have bought a ticket, sat on the 15-hour plane ride and had that experience. And then also from that, we saw a lot of fan cams from the World Cup where we saw Brazilian players, Eastern European, Latin American, all players essentially show their personalities while they were there, do dances, and again, like those fan cams of just those really, really integral moments that kind of make that memory light bulb go off when it comes to certain things that circle around football during that time period. Um, so I keep forgetting. Yeah, so when it comes to Saudi Arabia right now, there's these three big themes, which are sport, social media, and tech. Sport, we're gonna talk about it. But mostly I want to focus on how they're creating a culture of they're creating their self as a cultural center, and a lot of people are not paying attention to that. If you look at the amount of players that they're bringing in, the amount of hostings that they're having between football, futsal, and a lot of different sports, you'll see they're making their mark. And when I say social media, again, I'm talking about the TikTok, the Instagrams, the Facebooks, but I also want to include gaming. I think when we think about gaming, we just think about plugging into a computer or a TV and just going at it. But gaming has now taken such a social media approach because you need Wi-Fi, you need a headset, um, and then you're kind of like plugging into this virtual world where you can talk to someone from across the country, across the world, and you get to have these live conversations, and not the live kind of conversations that we have on Instagram and TikTok where you kind of have to have that moment of pause to read a comment and to think about it. These are like actual hands-on conversations that are being had. I think if anybody has ever really been into streaming, we cover you've seen it firsthand. I know Kaisen has been like a really big person when it comes to streaming, and if you've ever seen his setup, it's really that simple to have that much of a conversation, and even then there's the delay. So yeah, when I'm talking about social media, I'm including gaming because gaming is another way to include a younger generation. Like these social media apps do have age limits, but gaming doesn't. You can have kids play Roblox or Call of Duty, and it really does have a wide age range, and there's kind of no barriers to that. So that's kind of where I understand social media to be when it comes to just overall interaction. And then tech, there's a lot of technical things that go on in Saudi Arabia that I think a lot of people don't know about. I like to specifically talk about the Robot Olympics. It's not called the Robot Olympics. I don't remember the special name for it, but there are a lot of robot competitions, shall I say, where we have kids of very young ages learning how to code and maneuver these robots that essentially face off in kind of completing these tasks. um, I believe we are on our second or third 3D printed building. Um, Again, that's kind of something that I'm still trying to like wrap my head around today. I know that um there are two series on Netflix right now, Scene and Excellence, that kind of go into the background of a lot of the tech stuff that I'm talking about. So I would definitely encourage you to watch them because it is so cool, and it's just so important to understand the um just to understand that when it comes to a country like Saudi Arabia, there are more things than it just being the quote unquote desert. Um, so with all of those three kind of combined, you kind of create this special community that thrives off of, day in the life content, iconic TikToks like when Saudi Arabia had beat Lionel Messi and Argentina, and there was the "Where is Messi" um line that was kind of thrown all around. I think it might have been turned into a song. Um, but also with these three themes, there becomes this I guess you can call it there's an interest that becomes piqued because when you look at the map, Bahrain, Dubai, Abu Dhabi are all very close to Saudi Arabia. And I know at one point after the World Cup in Qatar, there were a lot of ads for people to visit Qatar. And then there were also a lot of ads for people to visit Saudi Arabia. So with that being all of this kind of like tying in between the global migration and never having to leave your house to visit somewhere, and also just this big funnel of information that's shared, it just kind of is the welcoming of Saudi Arabia in a way that a lot of people will have never been able to see it because it has been um I like to say that we lived behind a curtain in the Middle East for a very long time. And I think now has been that time period where we're slowly but surely kind of like opening it up. So next I'm going to be talking about the international stage setting. So these three um themes or like kind of events that happened are really big. At first for the first one, I'm sorry, I'm going to be talking about Al Ula. Al Ula is like a luxury hotel in the middle of the desert. Um, Al Ula and the Esports Federation got together and decided that they were going to host the Esports Drone Championship in 2023. So essentially, we had drones fly all over Al Ula and they captured it. And they had people sit in an amphitheater and kind of play the screens um, with all of the content. I heard that it was very, very nice. It was a very cool way to experience certain parts of Al Ula that you won't necessarily be able to see because they're so far away. Um, and it kind of adds to this notion that the Saudi Arabian government is very much trying to focus a lot of its pitching towards like cultural education, tourism, and community. And I think, of course, those three out of anything are always going to propel very well in society. But I think in this case, it works very well. Just because it gives a lot of people, again, that first, second, and third hand experience that they probably may not have ever had the chance to experience before. Um, the second bullet point was a quest for hope. There is a game or adventure on Roblox and I believe the Dreamland where Ula created an adventure essentially that focuses on the a almost extinct Arabian leopard. There's about seven or I think six or seven different skins of the leopard that are all very cultural based. I believe if you play the game, there's like explanations and things like that. But essentially, it walks kids and game players through the process of what it takes to find the leopard, take care of it, breed it, and all of those other things. Um, I know that it has a really, really, really big kind of like hit off mark. A lot of kids love it. But again, that's that overall theme that I was talking about of gaming reaching from the youngest of the youngest to the oldest of the oldest, and also that um, continuing conversation of education and learning. The second one, the Saudi Grand Prix, which is my personal favorite. I've been twice. It was the third Middle Eastern race. I mean, the third Middle Eastern country to enter the circuit in 2021. The other two countries are Abu Dhabi and Bahrain. So the track that they have right now in Jeddah is a temporary track. Um, but it does have some permanent pieces. The Qadiyah track is the actual permanent track that will be, or that hopefully will start being used in around 2030. But because there are speculations about the Jeddah track and what's going to happen with the Jeddah track, a lot of people are talking and having conversations about maybe the Qadiyah track is going to be the second um, race that they have in the circuit. Right now, America is the only country to have three races in its country. We have the Miami Grand Prix, the Austin Grand Prix, and the new Las Vegas Grand Prix. And again, with that trying to fit in and show itself as a real contender, it would be essentially smart to add that second or third race if need be, but fingers crossed, we'll see. And then of course, Tim's favorite subject to talk about when it comes to Saudi Arabia is soccer. Um, this year alone, they've had like 7 FIFA Club World Championship matches that they hosted. Um, the Federation has honestly been doing a lot of things when it comes to just overall the involvement and getting people involved. The Middle East has been very football centered, but we're starting to see a big attraction for basketball as well. But to circle back to football, of course, as everybody knows, we won the 2034 World Cup bid. Fun fact, when I went on the podcast with Tim, I basically called it. I think we did it, the podcast went live on the 11th, and literally the next week, the article came out on Front Office that they won the bid. So that was really fun. It was a really funny moment for me on Instagram to see all of this kind of play out. Um, and right now there's something projects that are going on that will hopefully propel Saudi Arabia to hopefully win the 2036 World Cup. I mean, not the World Cup, the Olympics. But before we jump into all of that, there's a bunch of like multiple multi-year contracts for a bunch of different countries. I got a quick little list of the years for the rundown. So from 2024 to 2026, we are hosting the Asian Champions League, the Spanish Super Cup, and the Italian Super Cup. It was just announced today that in 2025, they will be hosting the FIFA Futsal World Cup. And futsal is kind of like indoor football. Um, and for that, we've just had our second season for the women's teams. In 2027, in 2027, there'll be the Asian Cup. In 2029, there'll be the Asian Winter Games. 2034, there's going to be the Asian Cup and the World Cup. And then in 2036, pending, I'm putting a really big pin on it, that there will be an Olympic bid. I don't know. I haven't seen the other countries that have done the bid, but I think that we will be a really strong contender. um, so of course, following along with trends right now, we know that in America, women in sports have been uh, groundbreaking would be the best word to say. So I wanted to I wanted to talk about and focus about women in sport in Saudi Arabia. So a lot of people may or may not know, before 2019, girls were only kind of allowed to play sport when it came to gym. There were kind of like little um instances where they could play in school and things like that. But in 2019, legislation passed that allowed women to play sport publicly. And in about 5 or 6 short years, we're starting to see a lot of the benefits from that. So the inaugural women's club soccer season started in 2023, which essentially started, there were a lot of local community club teams that would play, and the Public Investment Fund backs 4 of Saudi Arabia's biggest Champion Leagues teams, which are Al Ittihad, Al Hilal, Al Ahly, and Al Nasser, which is my personal home favorite, just for you to know. And we won the championship twice. Um, so you had these big four teams come in to kind of take over the club, the community club structure, and start to build this infrastructure for the Women's Champion League. And I don't know if I talked about it before, but a lot of these community leagues were led by an initiative called Sport for All. Um, and again, like all in these pictures on the side, you see young girls who probably are now having the realization that they can dream about playing professional sport. Um, this inaugural season kind of trickled over into Saudi Arabia getting a national women's football team. I got to see them play while I was gone. And it was absolutely crazy, groundbreaking. There were tears. But yeah, we now have a women's national football team where we have women who wear hijab, women of all different descents and colors and representation. Um, and it's quite honestly like just really cool to see. They've done really well um in that sense. But oh, there's a question. What sparked the legislation to change to allow women to play sports? Um Honestly, I would say that it kind of was something that was always in the works. As we have a younger generation, and a lot of the women that now work in sport are women who at one point in time wanted to play sport professionally, but just never really had the chance. So I would just really call it like the new wave generation, just saying like, hey, there's an opportunity. And again, like the global stats and things like that to see how, I guess you would say like monetarily and just like economically fruitful it is to allow professional sports to be played on both sides, kind of works out. To me, that would be first the biggest thing. But again, I would say Saudi Arabia has recently just been going through a lot of changes of trying to get into that again, global assimilation. And again, you can't really open up your doors to other countries if you don't at first open up your doors at home. So then I will circle back to the national football team. Hopefully we will see them in a couple of years actually play in the Olympics and in the FIFA World Cup. But outside of football, we have Rima Alavoud, and she is specifically Saudi. She has one of the highest benchmarks right now for Formula E for a single seat driver. She's kind of been plastered everywhere. She has the cover of Vogue Arabia. She's just been really, really really and like the big pusher for women to join motorsport, to get into motorsport within Saudi Arabia. Outside of Saudi Arabia, there are two sisters who are currently in the F1 Academy, um, Amna and Hamza Al Kabasi, who have been doing really well this season. Um, one races for Red Bull, and I believe the other one races for the I think it was formerly Alpha Turai, but I don't remember what they call it now. They changed so many names. But of course, with sport comes activations, and we start to see a lot of these activations now target young girls to be in a space where you can come to a game and you can have the poster of your favorite player. You can make signs. There's actual visual representation. And from that, we start to see a lot of youth teams on the rise right now. There's been a huge uptick in girls playing sports. It's kind of been like they've been antsy all along, and now they are finally getting their chance and they're taking it by the horns. The U17 and the U23 national team has won their Asian Cup Champions League. And then Saudi women's basketball, they've done really well the past couple of years. And again, basketball is starting to be something that's very big in the Middle East, and it's taking over. Let me see. I think there was something in the chat. Okay. So yeah. There have been some really good ideas and revamps right now that are happening in Riyadh, that are going to be centered around sport. Mostly it all came about for the 2034 World Cup. But the four little things that stuck out to me that I think we should really pay attention to are, number one, the Sports Boulevard. So the Sports Boulevard essentially will host about several different club training centers and academies, which I read somewhere that would probably make Riyadh one of the healthiest cities in the world, which is great for athletes, but it also kind of piques the interest of people who are very like health conscious, to try to come and see like what's going on and how all of this came about. Um, in this situation of revamping, about, I want to say maybe a couple of months before, or yeah, a couple of months before Ronaldo signed his contract to Al Nassr. um I don't know if a lot of people know, but he has his own hotel chain, and I believe, if I'm right, if my gut is right, which I think it is, we'll probably see a CR7 hotel. um because there was an article that came out, and I think Tim shared it with me as well, about him trying to find real estate for his hotel chain in Saudi Arabia. Again, we're starting to see athletes move to different countries where they are getting more than just money in their pocket. And this is one of those instances. And as well, I would like to just bring up to the conversation Messi and all of the stocks he has in, I believe it's Apple TV, which kind of helped him get to where he is in Miami. And that's another thing that athletes do have to think about now, when they're going abroad, in the sense of how can I get my value and my money. And I think these two athletes are the pinnacle of taking a situation and making it work for you in the best way. Um, but yeah, there's been an increased interest in football culture. Um, I would say personally, because I see a lot of Brazilian and Eastern European and African players coming to the Middle East to play, Saudi Arabia specifically. And with that, if you know anything about soccer, there is the holy grail standard of Brazilian football. Everybody loves Brazilian football. They love the flair, the strategy. And right now we're starting to see Brazilian football players and the Latin American players as well kind of migrate towards Saudi Arabia. And when you have these big names like Talisa, um, Ronaldo, Neymar, um, and I think I'm forgetting a few, but you have big names like this that are bringing in the views, their household names, no matter where they go. And especially after the whole situation with Ronaldo and the English team, you start to see like, okay, here he's bringing in value, he's bringing in money. I think this year alone, if you look on the Al Nassr page, there is a lot of Ronaldo shots, and rightfully so, because he's bringing in a lot of attention and a lot of followers. And then just to flip it on the other side, we're starting to see a lot of multi-purpose sport attraction areas being built, much like the Staples, the renewed Staples Centers, I believe it, where the Lakers play, and I know for sure where the Braves play, where there's like a lot of little shops and other things that you can do before and after the game. the clubs, the bars, the things of that sort. Now the bar situation, I'm not 100% sure on how that's going to work, because one of the interesting parts about globalization is also the hardship of cultural preservation, because a lot of the times you do kind of have to assimilate into a way that kind of goes against your beliefs. And in a Islamic country, there's a lot of different rules about how those things are going. I believe that they may be trying to work towards a situation or scenario where there may be drinking allowed. Um, I don't know how that's gonna fare over or what that's gonna look like, but I would definitely tell people to keep that on your radar, because it could make a really huge difference. Um, but also just like all together, these revamps that we're starting to see are going to make a better chance for the 2036 Olympic bid. Um, what usually happens when the Olympics comes to a country is a lot of the times the country has to make a lot of sacrifices, with moving people in and out, trying to get riffraff away, and just kind of coming in and overall just making it a safe place, which I mean, by anybody's standards, they kind of differ. I know for sure Brazil was a really big project for the Olympics. I think they're still kind of going through and paying off of their debt. And I know there were a lot of issues if you've been keeping up with the Paris Olympics, as far as um, them trying to get students to give up their housing in order to move in the athletes to that student housing. Um, so again, if you create the space where there will be a lot of athletes, because again, we have international athletes coming into the country, we want to keep them all in one place. And it needs to be a place that has enough to keep them there and not kind of like wander around. Um, like a kind of basically a small Olympic city. Um, so yeah, I think this will help the bid placement a little bit, because depending on what other countries, of course, enter the bid, they kind of are already thinking ahead and kind of getting everything situated. And that is all I have for anyone today on my end. Of course, I know Tim has a bunch of questions. So if anybody has any questions, we can go ahead and knock those out too.
Yeah, I better drop them in the chat because I'm about to go in with these questions. First and foremost, well done, yo. For real. You know, it's exciting to see how not just like what you share, but also how you share it when the context you provide helps us to learn more about what's happening. I'm over in Saudi Arabia. Before I jump into some questions, I do need a confirmation from you that when we host this summit in person next year, you have to come. You got to come present. You
Okay.
can't say no. You cannot say
Well,
no.
then, I mean, honestly, Tim, we've been through this with this. You told me I needed to make a presentation. You told me this in like, I want to say April of last
I,
year, and you
I
was like,
told
I need you to be ready. Was I not ready?
I told you, yo. You're right. You're right. You're right.
I'm
Gotta
gonna
be in
have my,
person next year.
whenever you drop the location, you're like, hey, this is where it's gonna be. I will clear my schedule, Tim, and I will be there.
Are we going to? You might need to take Emirates Airlines, which I want to jump to right now because
Okay.
you mentioned us obviously to talk about Saudi Arabia, but one of our first conversations you mentioned the Gulf. What is it? At? The Gulf Cooperation Council, the GCC. So can
Mhm.
you just share more about what the GCC is before I jump into this question related to Emirates?
Okay. So the GCC is basically just it's regional. It's the collection of a bunch of different cities. Tim knows I can't name them all. I think he's gonna drop them in the chat. But I know for sure it's Dubai, Bahrain, Oman, Yemen, Saudi Arabia. I know there's seven. I'm missing a few. Okay, yeah, he put them in there. Oh, there's six. Oh yeah, Dubai is in the UAE. Okay, my bad. But yeah, essentially there are these six countries that come together. They kind of all make decisions when it comes to climate, technology, any kind of initiative that's been going on that's going to affect the tourism of the entire region. They
Mm.
come together. I guess you can kind of say it's similar to like the Senate and the House of Representatives, but it's kind of like all bunched up into one.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the best, like, kind of like Western centered definition I can give.
No, I appreciate that because one thing I think that slid under the radar, this is my personal opinion, is when Emirates became the global airline partner for the NBA this
Oh
past, what,
yeah.
2 months ago. And I,
Mm-hmm.
in Emirates, UAE airline. And so I'm like thinking about, because nominal presentation, part of my brain is like, don't sleep on Mexico, which I still firmly believe. Then I'm thinking about Africa and seeing what's going on in the African continent. I'm like, yo, Africa's about to blow up too with the
Mm-hmm.
number of entrepreneurs and, entering new markets, et cetera. With the GCC, Saudi Arabia, I'm like, well, damn, like, it's really happening right now. So I guess if someone who you said before in your intro, the work that you've done to learn more about what's happening in sport has helped you to come closer to your culture, find more about yourself. Like, what are you seeing and experiencing, especially as a woman from Saudi Arabia, as you're seeing this happening in real time, and you not
Mhm.
just seeing it, but being a part of leading it, what it looks like moving forward?
I think what it looks like moving forward is a lot of the same thing that's happening with women's sports. We're going to see a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people go. We are seeing a lot of people show up to the women's games. We're seeing a lot of people repost. A lot of people are interested. Again, like I said in the podcast, like women in sport, women working in the Middle East has always been a thing. You
Mm-hmm.
just don't know it because it's not a character trait. Like there are certain things about individualism that works in the Western world that doesn't work in the Eastern world, which is like
Mm-hmm.
part of like my big mind blow when I go back and forth. Um, I think honestly, we're gonna see potentially a railroad open up where we're going to start to see women players and men players start to transfer over. Not because of money, but because of opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and a lot of the times, we have a lot of big players who essentially leave the NBA, the NFL, and move to other countries just because the passion for the game is still there, but there's this notion in America where if you're in the front of a camera, you're automatically a role model instead of just being a person. And I think
Mm-hmm.
in the Middle East, there's the reverse of that. You're always going to be looked at as a person, but you will be kind of like role model or idolized in the eyes of kids because again, they're kids. But it's just not as serious. Um, so yeah, I just honestly I can say from December to January, it was just like back to back to back learning about women's sport in Saudi Arabia and how it felt like it kind of came out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the positivity, the change, the excitement to talk to the players, to see the players, to know that they're getting paid. Like they're not just, in America, when they start leagues, a lot of the times it's a voluntary thing. You have to still work a regular 9 to 5.
Mm-hmm.
People are getting paid enough to live and to enjoy life and travel and do all of these things. So yeah, I think in a couple of years we'll start to see that railroad being built. Um, and then from there, honestly, I will say you will never really know. That's why it's really important. And I'm always stressing to people like you need to watch what's going on because you will not know. And then the next day you will wake up and you'll be like, oh, that's interesting. Again, because the Middle East has always been in basketball. Again, they've had I guess you can call it like study abroad for the NBA where they would come to Abu Dhabi. I think they had a game in Dubai as well. But those places that have like this alias of being like extreme luxury, extreme high class. And I believe like with the opening of Saudi Arabia and Saudi Arabia also having an F1 race,
Hmm.
it's kind of like peak luxury culture because see, for you to have an F1 race means that you had to meet Western luxury standards and not just American luxury standards, but European luxury standards.
Well, I don't know why Vegas got a race, but that's another story for another day. But I want to stay on this luxury this luxury piece because we had talked before as well. We were talking about which sports Saudi Arabia had in many ways I guess prioritized, well not prioritized, which sports have become more visible than
Mm-hmm.
which Saudi had investments in, and that was F1 and golf. You mentioned right the luxury piece, the high class,
Mm-hmm.
and baseball got money, but it ain't F1 money, and it
Yeah.
definitely ain't golf money. So can you talk more about how culture is influencing which sports the Saudi Arabian government and stakeholders are investing in because of cultural norms already present?
I would say like baseball, I don't know if baseball will ever touch the Middle East or Asia because there's cricket. Cricket has been a very big investment that Saudi Arabia has been backing for years. And with the PIF, the Public Investment Fund, I call it the PIF.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there has been even more money funneling into cricket. But yeah, I think for shock value, it's been this kind of we're gonna go for not the regular stuff. We want to go for the high brand luxury stuff, and then we'll trickle down.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a lot of the times you see countries do the opposite. They'll start with like NFL or NBA, and then they'll go up. But again, with the Saudi resources, there's a Ferrari there's a Ferrari museum or Ferrari what do you call it, factory, I believe, some one of those out there, so it was kind of like duh, why not. But again, when you think about Saudi Arabia, I know for sure when the news broke that after Saudi Arabia beat Lionel Messi and Argentina, that they all got gifted Rolls Royces. And of course, you think they didn't even win, but
Mm-hmm.
Rolls Royce. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they did the impossible. So, you know.
True.
But when it comes to that, you see that there's this kind of wealth of money. And when you hear certain um artists and TikTokers and whoever kind of come into contact with Saudi Arabia, they always talk about the luxury. And I think the luxury of Saudi Arabia goes beyond just like the new age tech stuff. It's also the luxury of being able to live in kind of three life tenses. So you kind of get to live in the past, the present, and the future, in a sense, compared to what's going on in other countries. Like I said, there's like 3D printed buildings now.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you have the present where everybody's like on TikTok and this and that. And then you have the past where you can go and see these like UNESCO sites where, like, again, there were people um, who hundreds of millions of thousands of years ago lived and walked on these same sands, these same rocks. They climbed the same mountains and things like that.
Mm.
Again, with Saudi Arabia just being religiously a really big contender for bringing in people. So I mean, like, in a sense, you can do Umrah or Hajj, and then you can spend that week, and then you can have another week where you're just engulfed in Saudi culture, and all of like the really up to date cool things.
Yeah, I can't wait to visit. I can't wait. It's gonna be a long flight from San Diego, but I can't wait to visit. Let me know when you're gonna be there. It's gonna be a long
I'm
flight.
trying to think.
I don't know which way I'll fly
I
actually.
think it might actually be shorter.
I'm gonna look right now as I ask you this next question. You said before that you can't have sport without the world.
Hmm.
That you cannot have sport without the world. Why is it important for Saudi Arabia to be present at the table when making global sport decisions?
Oof, that's a good one. I would say it's important because there's so many conceptions of misconceptions about the Middle East and sport and the way we visibly show up that sport is kind of the only entity globally that doesn't really require much. As an athlete,
Mm,
as a fan, you literally just show up and you participate. Um, Again, with the experiences I've had in esport, I've seen kids who come from Germany and Brazil come together and play a game, not speak a lick of each other's language, but play a
mm,
game so seamlessly together that it kind of just makes sense to be in that conversation and to be at the table, because again, we talk about sports kind of like the center of Western culture. Everybody grew up an athlete, everybody grew up on a team. Whether you decided to stop playing when you were 5 or you stopped playing when you were 25, 30, whatever, you're still ingrained in that sport culture because it's ingrained in you. And when you look at the way that society kind of works, you see a lot of the themes in sport transfer over. And I think,
mm.
like I said, sports kind of that place where there's no boundaries, there's no kind of setting, there's a no, you can't sit here. Even though people try to make it that way, but you really can't stop someone from supporting a sport or being involved in a sport. It's just a universal kind of blanket that everyone's allowed to share.
Love that answer. I love that a lot. Two questions for you to close this out. What are you learning about yourself? Not even learned, but learning present tense about yourself as you're entrenched in this work right now.
Ugh. I'm learning that a lot of the things that I was in school talking about I hated or that I never wanted to do. I see Dr. Genfi is in here. I think she
Mhm.
can attest to it too because I was very loud about it. Um, there were a lot of things that I did not want to do that I was just really hell bent on not doing that uh I'm now doing. Like I hated sport finance. Hated it. But I'm starting to see that sport finance does not limit you to just sitting in an office and delegating money to teams. It's getting your whole state or country involved. There's so much more that goes into it, and I think when I was in school I was just very like, it's all about sport. And then you get out here and you start having conversations with people and you start going to events, you learn that it really is just ingrained in everything and there's a place for it everywhere. um, Also thought that I wanted to be a compliance girly. Come to find out, I want to be in compliance, but not in the way that I thought I want to be in compliance. I want to make the rules. I don't want to enforce the rules.
Mm.
Um, so now I'm going through that whole thing of like, I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go to law school, and now I'm like, no, we're just gonna go do this. Like in my mind I want to do like a double master's program, and then if a PhD is needed, which I'll probably find that it's needed because I love school,
Mhm.
I'll go on and do that. um but yeah, I've just been learning a lot about being open to opportunities and not just like being in your head and being like, no, I don't want to do this, I'm not going to do it, I'm going to do it my way. Because doing it your way, it may work, but it's gonna take a lot of hard work and perseverance. Um, Trust me, now I wish that I probably would have took like a sales position and just worked my way up. But me being me, I was like, I don't want to do sales. I'm not gonna do
Mm.
something I don't want to do.
Mhm.
Especially after I spent all this time and money. No, I'll be okay. I'll figure it out. And yeah, it's working. Also I learned that there's a lot of opportunity, just networking wise. And I have to again thank Dr. Genvi because whew, I can tell you from my graduating class, we were all very, very thankful for her because she probably was one of the first Black female professors that we had that
Mhm.
was really a resource. She had us connected. Well, me personally, I could talk about my um ex- she connected me to a lot of people. I made a lot of great connections. I've still keep in contact with a lot of those people, and they've all very much helped
Uh,
me get to every single position that I've had. So she taught me the importance of networking, and not only creating your network, but sharing that network with the people around you, because again, you never know who's sitting across from you or behind you.
mm,
And we've just been, honestly, my class, we've all been kind of having these full circle moments where we're like, oh yeah, remember when we was in class and we were doing this? Yeah, we're here now. So
man.
yeah, it's all about network. It's all about being a part of a community, and you really get to create your own community. I think a lot of the times we're taught that you have to join a community when that's not necessarily true. You make a community. I've made a community of people who may not have essentially been interested in sport in Saudi Arabia. And now I'm getting people on LinkedIn that want to have a talk conversations. I'm having people on Instagram that are talking about what's going on. I'm seeing my friends repost Al Ittihad, Al Ali, Al Nasser, and these are people who essentially never knew about sport in the Middle East. And now it's just kind of cool to see that, I'm creating a space where people are learning and they're enjoying it and they're wanting to share it. Because I think a lot in this work that you do in sport, especially in the educational space, you have to create a platform where people are not only willing to learn, but they're willing to share.
Mm, mm. You almost might drop it, but I got the last question. I
Yes.
got the last question. She almost might drop. I almost let you just might drop. But how can I best support you, my friend? Like I said, you're gonna be whatever commissioner, World Cup director, whatever role you want to make or create for your obviously consulting still. Like, how can I best support you right now as you continue to walk in your evolving purpose journey?
um Honestly, keep sending me the things that you send me on LinkedIn, because they have been really helpful with me kind of structuring my thought process. Don't worry, I'll be very much hitting you up for a recommendation very soon. But yeah, honestly, I can't ask for any more. I mean, you gave me a platform to talk about what I love and what I want to do. Not once, but twice now. And from it, I've learned a lot. You put me in the direction of the global, what is it, Respectful Disruption Summit.
Oh
I
yeah,
connected to a lot of people, to know that there are a lot of people who want to disrupt. And you and me, we kind of don't mind the respectful part.
not at
We
all.
don't mind going in and knocking stuff over, but it's
Mm-mm.
nice to know that, there's some kind of politics to it. But I mean, at
Mm-hmm.
the end of the day, I'm gonna do what I want to do. You're gonna listen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would just say the way you have supported me, I can't ask for any more, because it's been very, very um life changing. And I know I always say this when we talk, but it has really been life changing, not
Wow.
only in a professional sense, but in a personal sense. Because being a woman in sport is hard, man. It's really hard. And to have people who see you and who at every point are there. I can share ideas, I can talk about it. And you always pushing me to do stuff I don't really want to do. Like this new thing you just sent me, I'm like working on it. I'm like,
Oh
why?
yeah.
Um, so
I think
yeah,
she.
I can't say no more. I can honestly just thank you.
Nah, you said I gave it to you. You earned it, yo. I know Dr. G helped prepare you, but you earned it. So I'm glad that you are feeling not just all the love, but really seeing the fruits of your labor. Not just the last 12 months that I've known you, but I'm telling you, these next. I mean, you didn't told us. I mean, the last hour, but like it's
It
happening. It's
is.
happening.
It's
It's
right there.
happening. I'm telling you. Check this out. There's only one way you can support me is I'm looking at this flight. So I got to go San Diego to Chicago on American, then Chicago to Hamad International Airport, DOH. That sound
Oh
familiar?
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. And then Hamad to King Khalid,
Hmm.
RUH. All right. So those last two flights are on Qatar Airways. So if you have a flight voucher, airline miles, You know what I'm saying? Want to put me in
I'll
first
talk to
class or
you.
whatever? Let's figure
Look,
that out, my
it'll
friend.
have to be after I'm going again in 3 weeks. So we'll talk about
We'll
it. We'll
talk.
talk
We'll talk.
about
We'll talk.
it.
But good to see you for real. Again, for everyone who's been on the call, I know you learned a lot for sure. Be sure to follow up Tatyana on LinkedIn, as I'm sure she would love to have a follow-up conversation with you about what's happening both currently, but also what she foresees and predicts, and quite honestly, is going to happen moving forward. But again, the end of day three of the summit is over, which is wild. We didn't have Saudi Arabia, we didn't have Ecuador, we didn't have the UK. It's a beautiful
Colombia,
thing. The,
man,
lo- the walk
you
is
got
over.
everybody.
Yeah, I told you I was not playing around. And they, let me be quiet. Let me be quiet. Let me be quiet. But tomorrow we go to Africa. So we got Democratic Republic of the Congo as well as Nigeria. Then we'll move over to the UK, Mexico, Ireland, and then close out talking about sport immigration. So
Mm.
we're just
Just doing stuff.
we walking, my friend. Good to see you. See you tomorrow for day four. Peace out.
Bye, everybody.
Peace.